And we are live with another Freedom Friday. It is your boy, Chris Stewart, C Straight, and Sharif El Mekki from West Philadelphia, born and raised on the playground is where he spent most of his days. Good morning, brother. Good afternoon. How you doing? Good morning, whatever it is.
Hey. Yeah, happy Friday. Happy Freedom Friday. Good to be here. Good to see you. And man, we got a show to talk about. We got some stuff to talk about.
We do have a little bit to talk about. So I usually start the show by saying it's Freedom Friday and you are still not free, but hopefully you'll be freer after we get done with this hour. One way in which we know that we're not free is by some of the issues that we encounter when we try to be ourselves and tell our story and have a stand or get jobs or, just generally pursue the lifestyle of being free and being educated and being Black. When you put all those together, you want to feel like you've done some things in life. You've been educated in a way to which you should be treated fairly by your society. And that we're still not there yet. That's not what's happening. So I want to start out by lifting up this article that Education Post posted. That has now become a problem. So on June 29th, 2020, we posted a piece from an educator, and I'm going to drop it in the comments for our friends and family to see in the comments. The name of the piece is, "If you really want to make a difference in Black lives, change how you teach white kids." The piece is by Nahalia Weber, who is the executive director of the Orleans Public Education Network in New Orleans. It's an organization that I first was introduced to in 2014 or 15 and have seen the work that they do for years. We don't always fall in the same place when it comes to things like reform or charter schools or whatnot. Where we fall in the same place of is that we are Black and we all have an understanding of what that means and has meant for us in America. Ms. Weber's piece in it, she talks from a point of pain, from a point of anguish, from watching things happen to people like George Floyd over and over and over again. And in it, she talks about how it's like a choking to see the way that her father and her brothers and her cousins, her family members get treated, and watching the violence, the killings, the violence at the hands of Black men, and understanding the long-term historical significance of how that has happened over long periods of time adds up in you. It builds up. It becomes intolerable at some point. And her piece, 99% of her piece is about that. It's about that hurt. It's about that anguish. It's about that suffering. But she gets down to this point that becomes controversial for white people. And I'm going to tell you how, and I'm going to show you how it becomes controversial for white people. So she says, whenever we talk about what's wrong with the system that trains and socializes young minds to become violent and depraved adults who, say, choose to choke people out on their jobs, all we ever hear is that Black children, Black families, Black communities, Blackness are behind and stuck in gaps. Conservatives, liberals, and progressives alike grow their careers and feed their families off of myths about Black deficiency. If you let them tell it, Black kids are in terrible shape and white children are doing gloriously. But now, how can white kids be doing okay when they're growing up to be police officers, district attorneys, mayors, judges, media, mothers, fathers, and presidents who take away Black life and call it justified? As Black bodies drop like flies around us from physical, medical, economic, and material deprivation and violence at white hands, how can we in any of our minds or metrics conclude that whites are all right? What kind of warped standards are these? So that is really a passage from her piece. That's the crux of what it is that she wants to get across. But let me show you where this becomes a problem, right? So I'm going to share my screen here. And on the screen, you can see, so Megyn Kelly, who was due, and don't worry about the picture there. This is the New York Post. Megyn Kelly pulls her son from her woke school after an anti-white letter gets offered around in her school. So the white letter that they're talking about is this piece from Education Post. So this is the New York Post here. Megyn Kelly pulls her son, and all of this is not about the 90% of what I just said about the piece being about this woman's pain and anguish and the Black pain and anguish. The 99% about this is how Megyn Kelly felt about that piece being circulated in her school and how it caused, this is Megyn Kelly here, how it caused her to pull her son out of that school because she just couldn't take it anymore. This stuff about anti-whiteness and killer cops, in the piece that we posted, the woman does talk about, if you grow up to be a killer cop in schools, what do we expect, kids to think about, cops or something like that. And so this entire piece is the flip side of it. Mm-hmm. So on one side, you have the Black teacher, mom, educator who's talking about the long-term Black experience. And on this other side, you have the white woman who has a distaste for even hearing about it. I don't even want to hear about it. Now, what people are going to say, and, it's funny in this piece, Megan's like saying, I am, I've put up with this for a long time. Mm-hmm. Schools are far left anyways. And it's not, they're far left. They're not my ideology, but, most of my friends are liberals and it's fine. I come from a Democrat family and I'm not offended at all by the ideology. And I lean center left on some things. Now, this is the same woman who got fired over racism. This is the same woman, the same white woman who on air said that blackface is okay and she didn't get why people make so much about it. This is the same woman who said Santa Claus is white, get over it. This is the same woman who said Jesus is white, get over it. So this woman is
like, I didn't know she had such history. I'm not surprised, but I just
completely has a history of being a right-wing talking head who in this case will get passed off as just being a gentle white woman who didn't like this far left crazy radical idea that somebody from a historically marginalized population would talk about their historic marginalization in such a way that she didn't appreciate. Mm-hmm. So that's what I want to talk a little bit about today. We'll round out how this comes into education too, because we have another example where this plays out a little bit in education. But hearing all of this, Sharif, how do you're in education too, and this is good to talk to you as an educator. This is a moment of education because there are going to be people that are going to side with the Black woman and what she's saying. And there are going to be people who side with Megyn Kelly and what she's saying. And they're going to make the two stories equal, as if they're like both equal. And you might have to go to school with kids from both sides of this and mediate this conversation. How would you get a productive discussion out of these two viewpoints?
Yeah, I think one of the best ways to present information to children, because you don't necessarily have to tell, children what to think. You got to teach them how to think, how to process, right? And so if you put these, we do this thing in education, teachers, we do it like a side by side. You put two text next to each other, and then you help the students analyze it. Once they understand how to do it, then this is just an exercise that they can do frequently, right? And you look at like what are the facts in the original piece by the sister from Orleans. What's her name again? And then the other one,
which you mean the one who wrote the original piece?
Yes, the original piece.
So her name is let me not mess up her name, Nalia Weber.
Okay, so
yes,
Miss Weber. So you're looking at that, and then you ask the students, okay, find the facts and do the research about the facts that she placed in her piece. When you do that same exercise with the other lady, the retort, so to speak, or talking about Megyn and whatever it is that she's angry about, they'll be able to see like, wait a minute, what are the facts that she's actually presented, right? And so right there, that's one just like a practical way for students to be able to approach it, and so they can see like where's the propaganda, where is the just the tirade. But what student, and you can do this over and over and over again, like you can see historically a Black person, David Walker's appeal, and then you can see what was the reaction to a person saying like, you know what, we are human beings. You can look at Patrick Henry, like, give me liberty or give me death, and then you can see, okay, what's the people of color when they say that? What's the response? And so students will be able to, on their own, really see if they just have the framework of this is how you analyze text, this is how you analyze responses, this is how you see the patterns. They will see that this is a consistent response, that it is, what society says, what Megan is saying, what her supporters are saying, the hate mail that you all are getting now, what they're saying is it is uncivilized to hurt white people's feelings and to point out things that they feel uncomfortable with or that they want to deny. But it's not uncivilized to murder people while you're on your job, claiming to protect and serve with honor and all that kind of stuff. It's not, uncivilized to ignore the histories as well as the realities that our children and our communities face, right? And it's a like grin and bear it. Like that's what they basically are telling. And when you don't, they have a problem with it, and that just shows it in a massive way. And it reminds me, as far as just education, Dr. Kelly Seaton wrote a piece a while ago in the Philly 7th Ward about what happens with white women's tears, right? And so Megan, that's another example of it, like the backlash that Dr. Seaton described that happens in education. What we're seeing it on a more public sphere through Megan.
You know what I think is really interesting about it is that there's a history to this exact dynamic that people won't know about. So you just read the New York Post story, you just feel like this is a today thing. Mm-hmm. And you just see it as today. Megyn Kelly didn't like something, and aren't those radicals going too far? Aren't the liberals going too far and whatnot? You don't realize that even in the middle of slavery, the gentle white women and the gentle white men of the time thought every way that people talked about their oppression was wrong, right? That they made too much of it. We feed you, we give you clothes, we whatever. And in every age since, the white people who were overseeing Jim Crow found a way to justify ignoring the voice of the people who were crying out about their pain during the civil rights movement. It took actually for people to see children and teenagers getting water hoses shot at them and dogs sicked on them for them to have any inkling of like, oh, God, maybe we're going a little too far with our long-term historic white supremacist stuff, right?
And maybe only because the international community, because I even doubt if it was just internal, if they still would have cared about it, because these are the same people that would send postcards. And it's not like it wasn't on the front of the newspaper. Yeah, images are different. But I also just wonder, how much of it was Cold War BS, that kind
well,
of
to
stuff.
that point, I mean, Derek Bell often makes that point about the fact you would have never had a change in white opinion and a change of policy when it comes to things like Jim Crow if it hadn't been for the fact that Russia was starting to take hold and communism was taking hold, and communism had a very strong multicultural bent, meaning, see, y'all should be with us because over there in the United States, they have white supremacy. We don't have white supremacy in communism. We have whole black nations that are communist. We have Fidel Castro is a communist, whatnot. So maybe you should join us in the United States. Seeing that thought kind of, okay, well, we are pretty damn racist and white supremacist, and we're not going to stop being that, but we should at least find a way to have an out. Like to talk about it differently. So let's talk about
gentlemen and women about it.
Yeah, let's be gentlemen, and let's not lynch you anymore. Let's just find economic and social ways to marginalize you. Let's make it so that even after a century of success in many different ways, we still have one white woman who cannot like a letter or an article that gets passed around at her school and pull her kid out of that school. And it makes the New York Post's news section. It's news that this one white woman with the history of racism didn't like something at her school. Do you know what kind of privilege it takes for something to happen at your school that you don't like and for it to end up in the New York Post?
That's another level, right? Like talk about being centered.
Oh my God.
The princess of racism, once again, being centered in the story. When the original story was like, yo, stop killing our people. Stop, stop spreading the seeds of white supremacy in your children and raising them to just, be be racist, and to be violently racist. Like, stop raising your children that way. Instead of always looking at, with this black pathology, let's look at another type of pathology. Racism is the pathology that America, has shot up. One of my students like, how did they become a world power? Oh, from their racist pathology, like that. That's how they became a world power in 200 something years. Free labor, imperialization, colonizing, genocide. This is what happened. And yet, anytime you point that out, they want to say you're not unpatriotic, you're you're a radical left, you're filling kids' head, you're indoctrination of children, all of this stuff, but never want to talk about the issue at hand.
I mean, they don't want to talk about the history. They want to act like everything started today and that we all started out as equal. So, listen, I don't know. It's, there is no more slavery and there's no more of all that stuff that you guys talk about in the past. So if you're behind, that's kind of on you. You got to stop all this whining about, racism and all that stuff and just take ownership of your life and all that. It's just an accident that white people have the entire Senate and most all of the houses of governor.
They work so hard.
They work so hard. And that, you had, 40 plus presidents and one of them was black. And none of them were anything else other than white, and that you've had 40 plus vice presidents and only one of them is black. And that's just an accident, right? Like, that's the way the cookie crumbles, man. I don't know what to tell you.
Exactly. Pull yourself up. Like, what are y'all doing? Catch up.
Pull yourself by the bootstraps. This is what I don't think. This is why I think it's important to keep going here and to push on it for me, though. I don't care about your genteel whiteness and your feelings. I actually don't, because at this point, what you have is a cold, white inability to have empathy for people that you have ruined. You did this. This is the hate that hate made. I don't care if you like how it sounds. I don't care if you don't like what the story is told or how the story is told or what is told about the story. Doesn't matter. You cannot like it. You did it. And you can say, I didn't do it. I never owned slaves. But your ass sure did come here from a shithole country after slaves had built this country and built an entire economy. And you benefited from what we built before you got here, only to side with the racist and become one of them. And now you're part of a people of a first class who suck up all of the resources, suck up all of the leadership positions, take first place in damn near everything, and then say, but I didn't benefit from any of that. It's nonsense. You did benefit from that. I'm Irish American. Great. Tell me what year you got here and how much did you pay into the system to come here? Because we had already built the system. We had already invested all of our sweat, labor, everything to build it. And you just walked in and, I worked hard. Really? Really, you did? Because I could tell you some stories about hard work that you didn't do. Right. So, yesterday, I don't know why.
Let's get them started talking about, the Irish were slaves. You got a little faction of nut jobs that want to compare indentured servitude to chattel slavery. You're right. Like, you read. I'm like, what? Where? Like, who was your teacher? Who were your parents and who was your teacher? I want to talk to them.
I mean, I want to talk about this thoughtfully, but it's hard for me, right? Because there are a group of people who really don't get it, and they will watch Megyn Kelly and just not understand why it's inappropriate to see things from her view. And I don't know what to do with that, because to me that just comes about maturity and judgment. Yeah. Are you mature enough to understand the two stories that are being told here and where they're coming from? The woman who wrote the Education Post piece, are you mature enough to understand from where she's writing that, from what pain source that is coming out of? And are you mature enough to understand the level of privilege it takes to try and equate Megan's dislike of the words to this woman's long-standing pain. Like, are you mature enough to do both of those things? And sadly, the answer to that for many is no. They are not. They have never had to encounter this story in any meaningful way. They have always been able to turn off the TV if they don't like the story, to change the channel, to stop reading the piece, to stop editing the piece. They've always had that. Meanwhile, what she is basically saying in her piece is we don't get to turn it off. As you have family members and others encounter these type of things, you don't get to turn it off. You know, I was reading yesterday a little bit. I was just about to say this a minute ago. I don't know why it came up, but King Leopold II colonizing Congo, right?
And he should be mentioned as much as Hitler, but he's not because of who he killed.
He was more robust than Hitler.
Yeah, I mean, he should be like, you know, like by far, but he killed black people, so that's not as it's
not seen as big a deal, even though he killed 2 to 3 times as many people as Hitler killed, you know. So King Leopold goes, you know, so if you look at all of his pictures and where he comes from or whatnot, he is definitely the definition of a spoiled white kid. King Leopold, when he's young and comes up, he just inherits like a country. Like his dad had, and they don't own the country, but he eventually makes it his own personal country, and and the country I'm talking about is Congo. So he goes into Congo, and he's leader of Belgium, but Belgium has no right there. So he sends in a white journalist, and he sends in some white speculators. They go and make deals with the local tribes. They give them some blankets or something to sign contracts that they don't even know that mean anything. And it gives him the rights to Congo. And before you know it, he's amassing a personal fortune off of rubber out of that country. And the atrocities that come with that, right? So this guy, if you're not producing enough, first of all, these people who had never known slavery are now slaves, even though the international European community had an agreement not to enslave that way Black people in Africa at that time. It wasn't a treaty that everybody stuck to, but obviously. But he starts cutting off the limbs and the arms of people who don't produce enough labor every day. And as proof that his henchmen, his own police force that he has there, are actually whipping them into shape and making them work enough, they have to bring home a quota of arms and legs or limbs, hands and feet that they cut off. And so you have children getting their hands and feet chopped off, women, men, whatnot, in piles, and those limbs are being taken back. His contractor that he set up there, where most of the pictures of him sitting drinking coffee with a pinky up and a white hat and white clothes with his legs crossed and blah blah blah, so kind of imperial. His henchman has the heads of people that they've killed lining his garden, basically, right? What's the psychology behind this? Is who you're saying civilized the world. This is part of their civilizing strategy, right? Now I can tell you that story, and Sharif, you could probably tell me others.
You got so many of them. Cecil Rhodes, right? Like is another, you know, right down a little bit southern of the same type of thing. Like, hey, we're gonna take this land and name it after, you know, after us. It's gonna be Rhodesia. Rhodesia. You know, I mean, just I mean, it's nuts.
Yeah. Tell me another one. Tell me more. Tell me if you know any more of these stories. I talk about one. So how many of these other stories do you think exist?
Oh my gosh. There's countless. I mean, and we're talking about like in the continent, then you can go to, you know, Asia. You can come back this way. You can talk about, you know, Custer. You can talk about, you know, Grant. You can talk about, you know, many of the
Andrew Jackson.
Exactly, Andrew Jackson, and how he, you know, basically used the entire federal government and federal funds to, you know, just annihilate, you know, people, right? Like, and say like, hey, God told us to do this, you know, just like, are you reading the same Bible as like, you know, but you're so blinded by your own, you know, just whiteness and, you know, again, back to, is it white supremacy or is it white savagery? You know, like that's
Mhm.
one of the essential questions of like how this all happens. And then while this is happening, you know, and a lot of times we want to get into the conversation of, oh, the white men, the land owning white men. There were their counterparts, the white women, who co-signed it, even if they didn't feel like, hey, I don't know where I fit in with this patriarchy. They definitely fit in well with the whiteness, and they use
Yeah.
that same you know, mindset to continue the oppression. When they say, hey, yeah, we're gonna get the right to vote, but how dare you let black men vote before us? And you know what? We're not going to connect with black women voters or voting for you all, because the white men that we adore, we're going to make sure that they're okay with us voting. And the best way to do that is distance ourselves from you. Right. And
Mhm.
so those tiers in that strategy that Megan is displaying, and as well as the reporter had a choice, the editor had a choice, right? And then we talk about like the media, like it ain't just Megan, right? Like it's a whole system, a whole apparatus that you know, coalesces around the anti-blackness and coalesces around the idea of like we need to mute and marginalize this group of people and center our own stories over and over and over again.
I think this point that you're making right now about the white woman has a place in the white family of oppression.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and we can't ignore that. I mean, let's talk about that. So let's just, there was another point that you made that I think is really important. When we talk about Custer and others, we talk about someone like Andrew Jackson, right? And the Trail of Tears and what was done to native peoples of the so-called United States, and how you have a president, 45, who loves Andrew Jackson as one of his heroes, and how you have people who fly the Confederate flag and say, oh, it's just our heritage, it's not about racism. And so they're linking today, something from today that they're proud of, to yesterday that is not something that we can share. I don't share that. Like, you're linking back to something like Andrew Jackson as a great American, blah, blah, blah. So your version of the world in history is that people who have done tyrannical, evil, oppressive, murderous things to other parts of humanity. When people hear crimes against humanity as a phrase, that phrase was coined by the outrage that people in the media had for what King Leopold did. Some of the original anti-black, crazy, Hitler-esque weird things done in Africa invented the term crimes against humanity. That's not a general term. Humanity wasn't having crimes against itself. White supremacy was attacking humanity, not just black people, just humanity, period, right? So this is a pathology of sorts. There's no way to look at what was done by these people to other people and not think there's something wrong with you. Like, you can't cut people's scalps off of their head, cut the limbs off of children, cut people in half in any age. You can't tell me, oh, well, Chris, it was just part of the time. That's just what people did. No, it's not just what people did. It's not just what people did. Yeah. And even if some of it is what people did, they sure didn't perfect it into a system, right?
And export it worldwide.
Export it worldwide. So Custer, Andrew Jackson, but you made the point about white women also. And I think this is important because one of the families in the comments put the Daughters of the Confederacy. And that's important because there were so many white female groups throughout time that were part of the maintenance of racism. Oh, yeah. They actually helped maintain it. The PTA had a history of this a little bit. There's a book called The Mothers of Resistance, and that's about the white women that fought integration and how they actually managed the fight against it. How the men were worried about laws or whatnot. The women actually were the ones seen as the defenders of white children.
They were, yeah. They, in some ways, they were in the front lines, right? Like they were in the street, they were in the proximity. They weren't at the Capitol. They were right there at that schoolhouse, right? When you what's her name? Lisa. One of the I think it was in Arkansas. One of the sisters, she's walking. You see this white woman screaming, like just. Oh, I mean, you can only imagine, what she was yelling. And then to later, have this, I think Oprah had them both on the show, And the white woman's kind of like, oh yeah, I apologize. It was like you could see that deep down. She's like, I'm sorry, y'all got a picture of that, but it wasn't anything of like deep remorse. It wasn't like what you would expect. Like, hey, you're in front of a national audience. You look like a rabid racist jackass. And it was kind of like, yeah, I wish I hadn't done that, but not the deeper reflection of, I was a lunatic, like this is what racism did to me. It created a monster within me. Right. And who's your grandchildren now? Like who are you? When we look at these pictures of people gleefully looking at people lynched, being burnt at the stake, all this stuff, you have to think like who are their grandchildren? And what roles do they have in society today? Because nobody talks about it. Nobody, it's rare that you say every once in a while you see like, oh yeah, my grandparent did this or my parent did that, so where they systemically did something. But it's rare that you see that. And so I'm like, yo, where are they? They didn't all get cut off at the stem. So where are these folks?
Well, I mean, you have to think that a good percentage of them are among that 70 million that voted for a president who had a dad that got arrested at a Klan rally.
No doubt.
Right. I mean, you have a president whose dad got arrested at a Klan rally. Right. You had a black president who had to disavow his pastor because his pastor said "God damn America" in a sermon where that was actually contextually appropriate for the sermon that he was giving. But it was taken out of context, and before you know it, as a black man, you have to go before the white audience and the white America and give a big speech about race, and it better be like bringing us all together. It better be like whatever. Then you get a president who comes right after that who says Mexicans are racist. Black people come from shithole countries. I don't want black people counting my money. Had a history of discrimination in housing against black people. Took out a full page ad for calling for the execution of innocent black people who were found to be innocent.
The murder, right? Like it was one of those old posters you see back in the day, like we wanted dead or alive, right? Like that's what he did. Despite
even worse, kids. It was like a modern version of the let's break down the doors of the jail, pull them out and lynch them. The lynch mob. So had he would have been one of the people back in the day previously that would have led the charge of pulling them out and putting them on trees, and they would have been innocent, right? But he didn't have to come out ever and do some big speech on race that brings us all together, makes us all see it like, from the same position. On this mothers of imperialism thing is important.
Mothers of imperialism, yeah.
Well, actually, in Dr. Curry's book that we did the book club on, he talks about the imperial white mother, how the idea that he goes through, it's a deep book, so I don't want to go through all of it. He definitely does expose the position that white women play within the maintenance of racism and how they get a free pass from it. I do want to give one example that's kind of an interesting example to me, which is there's this magazine called Mother Jones. Mother Jones is named after Mother Jones, one of the famous labor leaders in history, one of the most famous labor leaders in history. She was a firebrand. She was just a woman to be reasoned with, and she was fanatically about unions and unionizing and labor as the thing. She took it to, she was worse than Diane Ravitch could ever be on Bill Gates. She was that with Rockefeller. She went after the billionaires boys club and all that. So there's points in time where black people are migrating from the South to the North, and they're meeting white hostility. And this is the genesis of unionism. The genesis of unionism is white people wanting to protect their jobs from infiltrating black people. And it got so bad that there were places like in Illinois where when black workers would be coming from the South on trains to do these jobs that they were being lured to do, that white workers would attack the trains. And they had a couple of really bad bloody skirmishes. One of the bloody skirmishes, the whites actually attacked the trains and shot holes in the train and killed people, shot black people in those trains coming up as a super racist labor origin story that people never tell. This is like
Mhm.
super labor. So when it came down to it, Mother Jones said, "Bury me with my white boys," right? She wanted to be buried with the whites that were attacking the blacks over these jobs. She had raging racist opinions about Asians, didn't think that women should have the vote. This is one of my favorite parts. She was against the suffrage. She's like, we should know what a woman's place is, type of thing. But there's a magazine named after her.
Mhm.
There's an entire magazine named after her. And the story that I just told you, nobody who reads that magazine knows. And the people who tell us that unionism is so great don't know that story. And the people who look at white teachers unions and white women in teachers unions and think they're so genteel, just like Megyn Kelly, don't know that story. They don't know the story that if you read the book Uncivil Rest, about where teachers unions come from, that one of the big early pushes of teachers unions was that white teachers wanted protection from having to be transferred to teach into Negro schools.
Mhm. Exactly. That was labor rights then.
That was labor rights.
You know, I think there's a legacy for that.
Well, do tell, Sharif. Do tell. What do you think the legacy of that is?
I just wonder when we look at like student outcomes and how many actually want to teach in Black schools. How many may student teach to get to be able to say, yeah, I worked with them, but as soon as they can, they're fleeing to further and further rings of the burbs, right? And so, there that component of like don't transfer me, like I can't be transferred. And when you look at the numbers, just the sheer numbers, for Philly, for example, 30-something% teachers of color, 80-something% of the students are students of color, Black and brown, 80-something%. Like, but you see it in the toniest schools, where it does not look like the rest of the district. And that goes for every city across the country, I would imagine, where if it's the broken down, the lead infested, asbestos filled schools, it's going to be higher populations of Black and brown students. And you're going to have not parity, but you're going to have higher percentage of Black teachers in those buildings, as opposed when you go to the schools that we only serve the 99th percentile testing student. Then all of a sudden you got a whole lot of white students, white families and more white teachers, sometimes in some cities like Philly in the past, they've actually built schools just to keep white flight at bay. We've had.
What do you mean in some cities? In
many cities, right? You have places like Philadelphia, and you see this in some of the suburbs where they have like the county. Philly is its own county, so it doesn't always apply. But in some places where the counties, they say, "Hey, we separating from this. Where's the Black part? Let's X them out of this whole thing, and we're going to create our own." Northeast Philly is more diverse now, but when I was younger, that was a very white section of the city. That's where your cops lived. Right, like that's where your some of your politicians live. That's where the policymakers live. They lived in Northeast Philly, and they wanted to make their own city. They say, enough of Philadelphia. We want to create our own. And when you look at it, it's all about racism. Like there's no other reason to do something like that.
And they got away with it.
No, they didn't. They didn't get away with it, but it was kind of like, the North and the South. They're like, no, you're part of this economic engine. You ain't going nowhere. But it was a mob who were definitely trying to make that happen. A whole section of the city just say, oh, we're out.
And city after city, you see that type of battle take place. And, a lot of times, again, let's talk about the masculine and the feminine. In the masculine side, you consider the fight to change the policies and the laws and the architecture to be masculine. But the social part, you always forget that white women do play it's the moms who are really concerned about their good white children, who are the homemakers. If you look at almost any research about education, it does say in all races that women are the ones that make the majority of the decisions about education. Period, in a family. And that's even in patriarchal nuclear white families, that the women have a big say in the way that the kids are going to be educated. Right.
It's the hand that rocks the cradle, and that continues through kindergarten, right? Like it just continues.
Now, you do know that The Hand That Rocks the Cradle was a scary movie, right?
I
It was
do.
like a horror movie at some point. Let's shift gears just
Shit, we living in a horror movie, so
this is the horror movie. All right, so here we go. News flash. Major tensions flare over education secretary before Joe Biden picks one. And this is a story that was written in Education Week. I was about to say Education Post, which we are a fine publication, but we did not print this. And this story is about, you are quoted in this story, I want to say. So is DeRay. I'm name dropped in here, Joshua Starr. This was all about the flare-up that came with the candidacy for Secretary of Ed of Sonia Santelias, who is the superintendent of Baltimore Public Schools. I don't know if it's a superintendent or chancellor, but she leads the Baltimore Public Schools. She has been floated as a candidate for nomination for the education secretary position that Biden is considering right now. Her being offered up as one of the names on that list caused Carol Burris, who leads an organization called the Network of Public Education, or I like to call NOPE. She's the leader of that organization, which was founded by Diane Ravitch. The two of them took to Twitter to say, no, we don't need somebody like her. We don't need anybody who has, who has worked with TFA, who is part of Chiefs for Change. They just, they went on and on and on and on about her. They were trying to cancel her before she even got out of the gate. So this article talks a little bit about the pushback that you and I were part of. Mm-hmm. Like, and, we took to the internets, and we started pushing back on it. There's a hashtag called I Stand With Sonia. So if anybody's listening to this and they want to hear all of what was that issue, go take a look at it. And there are people who've come to Sonia's defense, and this article, I think, does a fairly good job of balancing it out there. I love to see that my boy El Mekki was in the last part of this. You get the last word, as a matter of fact, in this. Tell me what was a little bit behind tell me how the conversation went, like how the story, came about, was pitched to you, or, what you thought the writer was going after in telling this story.
Yeah. So, when I spoke to him, he was interested. He was, what he said he didn't really want to get into was the back and forth on Twitter. He didn't want to cover that as much, but thought it was inescapable because it had become, such a big deal, and the backlash. What his main concern, or quite not concern, his curiosity was how does the alliance break apart, so soon? So if these folks are like, oh, we're trying to get 45 out of office, how, the education wars, so to speak, and who's being centered in the education wars, like it's causing some of the alliances to fray very, very early on. And he just wondered how much of it is, is the Carol Burris's and the Diane Ravitches, how much are they looking at this to seek revenge for what they feel ed reform did in education, right? That their animosity towards Arnie Duncan or John King or Sonia Santelises, they were united around getting 45 out, but not anything about the education of Black children, which was we spoke several times about, like, how it wasn't brought up that much outside of COVID. I wish somebody can count, like, how many times was education centered that didn't have a COVID attached to it. Which means it was not even an afterthought, It
wasn't even an after glimmer.
Yeah, exactly. And so he was just, like, very interested in that piece. Like, hey, here are folks, presumably a lot of Democrats, but there's such deep divisions and there's still such animosity about, things that have happened. Like, how dare you, add things to the continuum of parental choice? How dare you say that anybody should be accountable for student outcomes, and particularly Black student outcomes? Are you out your mind? You want us to be accountable for that? Are you crazy? Right? Like, they still harbor that. They still preach that. And unfortunately, we have a whole lot of folks who are in front of our children who say, yeah, I ain't accountable for what you, what you learn. I'm not accountable for it, right? And so that is a banner. That is a banner that they carry into these battles. And
I mean, the thing that they hate most is the accountability part. So when they talk about, we don't need anybody from DFER, Democrats for Education Reform, we don't need anybody from TFA, we don't need anybody from, they're naming all of these groups that push things like accountability, like choice and accountability, which even choice is an accountability thing, because it means if you don't do a good job, I have a choice to get out of wherever you're at, right? Like,
and it's going to be mechanism to help you exit. You won't be trapped.
Yeah, you won't be trapped.
You won't be trapped by your zip code.
And they find that completely, like, they're hostile to it. They find that completely insulting to them, because they feel like, no, you should be trapped here. And if you learn, I should get credit for it. And if you don't learn, I should be able to blame your poverty for it. I should be able to blame your parents for it. And it's a very, again, colonial way of looking at life, masquerading as super liberal. Like, it's like, you belong to us. I am Queen Leopold, God damn it. What do you mean you should have a choice to be taught somewhere else other than where I'm teaching and earning my pension? How dare you?
And Leopold's going to go ahead.
Well, and also, how dare you even think about putting one of your people in leadership over me? Like, over me. Oh my God, I'm never going to look up and see one of you all
again.
No. We did that before. I don't want that to happen. These are the MAGA types of the left. You know, I don't think white educators to the left understand or hear themselves when they talk how close they are to MAGA people just of the left. They are the deplorables of the left, and they're happy. They are so happy to demean the deplorables of the right. They are so happy to differentiate themselves from those ignorant, kind of deplorable white people on the right. What they're not happy to be is compared to the stereotype of those other people that they're living up to themselves.
Oh, and you know, and it's so interesting that you bring up, you know, Leopold as part of our overall conversation. When Leopold is hacking, you know, people's bodies, you know, then you have folks like Burris and Ravage hacking Black women's characters, right? For the having the audacity to make a personal choice about her children, right? Like, that was also part of it. Not only who she's associated with, allegedly, right? But they don't bring about, like, one, her association with Black children. Something you don't have, Diane Ravitch. Something you don't have, Carol Burris. Even as a principal, that wasn't yours. That's not what you were known for, right? But here's this woman. You didn't bring about that alliance. Why? That's the most important thing. Like, what conversations are we having if we're not centering the Black children, Dr. Santelisa's and other candidates' relationship and experience and work with Black children, brown children, marginalized communities? That's not what's being centered. It's about who they don't like. And so they felt like, you know what? We don't like you. We don't like your association. So we're going to just jump in and bash. And then we got the other folks who they're minions, they're mentees, who also just jump in and co-sign and retweeting and things with no question, like, hey, Diane, that wasn't cool. I don't bang with that. Like, that's inappropriate to attack this Black woman this way, right? That stuff is what not only happened there, but that's just a microcosm of what happens, right? You hear Black people all the time saying they can't be their authentic selves in not just jobs, not just in corporate America, in schools, in the educational system. That if they advocate too hard for Black children, they're going to be punished in some kind of way, right? And punishment, remember, it's not just always somebody came and knocked you upside the head. Sometimes they want to punish you by trying to mute you and marginalize you. And the best way to do that is on social media. It's in publications. It's in the Mother Joneses or any other publication, right? That's the platforms that they use to punish our people, and that it's just ridiculous, man. So I'm glad that people saw that, called it out for what it was. And then of course Burris like, I got Black friends. I got people I want to see there. I'm not
let's
racist.
talk about that, because I'll show you some. Here we go. So So what good white racists do is they don't want to just take something from you. They want to offer you an alternative to the thing that you think is important. So if you're about Marcus Garvey or Malcolm X, they want to give you a Martin Luther King or somebody that is more appropriate to their liking.
They want to pick your heroes.
And in truth, they want to give you worse than a Martin Luther King because they actually didn't even like him either. They want to give you a Sammy Davis Jr., right? They want to give you somebody who tap dances and has one eyeball falling out. So here's her version of that. So here is did you say I'm wrong? I'm not wrong.
You're wrong.
Right? So here is her version. She's saying she told the reporter that you spoke with, it's absurd that I'm being called out for this being a race thing because we have our own people. So when she says our own people, this is so Tony Thurmond is the state superintendent of public instruction in California, very much a union guy. What a lot of Black leaders have done and figured out is that if you want to go into an education leadership role and post, all you have to do is suck down all of the union Kool-Aid, spit it out well, and then all of a sudden they will lift you up like nobody's business. She calls Tony Thurmond an educator. I looked up Tony Thurmond's record in millions of different places, and there is no record of him ever teaching in a district school. He's a school board member. So if he's an educator as a former school board member, then I'm an educator because I was a former school board member. So I should be Secretary of Education. In this thing where she puts him up here, Tony Thurmond's our guy, right? She has she includes 1, 2, 3, 4 hashtags all white people. Pastors for Education. Yeah, Pastors for Texas Kids is a group that is a union front group using white pastors in Texas to say they don't need charter schools. And Diane Ravitch is their graven idol that they're worshiping, not God, not Jesus, not Christ. Leonie Hampson here, who they have here, maybe you've heard Hamison, maybe you've heard her name before. She is a private school parent, just like Diane Ravitch is a white private school parent from New York, right? So that's what we got here. Tony Thurmond's our guy. Carol Burris, white former principal who taught in a school or who ran a school that only had 7% Black kids. Pastors for Texas Kids, a white front group for white unions where Diane Ravitch is working with them to help them expand their reach. Leonie Hampson, who is a white private school parent in New York who fights school choice constantly. That's what we're talking about here. Let's do the anatomy.
Carol, you can't even play the foxy white liberal, right?
She
like you literally tagged all white people, or like this is the Negro we want. Is that really what you just did?
That's what she did. Okay, let's talk about Julian. This is one of her other choices here. Professor, Julian Vasquez Heilig has done a high quality research on ed equity and taught in public schools. We don't need your defer picks. We don't need those Negroes, blah, blah, blah. We don't need them. She tags Journey for Justice, which is a Black front group for the unions, the Chicago Teachers Union, complete front group, loaded up with money by white progressive organizations and lifted up by white progressive organizations. Anthony Cody, pensionista, former white teacher from Oakland. Leonie again, white private school mom again, right? And Julie B. I dare you go look up Julian. You tell me to come back with. Not that Julian's a bad brother, but Julian himself went to a private school, graduated from a private school. When I asked him about it, he said that his parents had the resources to make it happen and they shouldn't be punished for it. And that doesn't mean that everybody else should be able to go to private schools also. When she says high quality research, look him up. His last research study was the weirdest, most awkward, bizarre research study ever. They claimed that he had created a new method of research. Sharif, his new method of research was listening to his own podcast that he did with anti-TFA people who had once taught in TFA, and he formed findings from that. That was his new research style. Sloppy.
Wait a minute. Let me make sure I understand this. He had podcasts, he re-listened to them, pulled nuggets out that he wanted to use that reinforce whatever it is that he claimed was researching, and that's the research.
That was his new research style. University of Kentucky put it out. Completely weird. He has done nothing but research against TFA and charter schools. He's a one-trick pony. He's also the guy who got spirited into this role as the appointed position in the California NAACP. As he was a board member on Dan Ravitch's group. And he had another one of their board members in San Jose write up a resolution for a moratorium on charter schools. And then him and Alice Huffman, the president of the NAACP in California, got that passed. Alice Huffman has been paid by Big Pharma to have the NAACP come out against regular or reasonable price drugs. She has been paid by the landlords to come out against rent control. She has come out against everything that the Bernies and the lefts, whatnot. She gets paid monthly from big industries to have the NAACP come out against things. And lo and behold, they also came out with the charter moratorium, and every union in the United States, actually 5 minutes after it was passed, had it in their tweet and in their feeds. It's almost as if they had coordinated it and that they already knew. And he was the mastermind in California behind making sure nobody knew about that. As a matter of fact, someone who's watching right now, Christine Laster, could put it in here because she was one of the people who got attacked by them.
I remember that.
When a couple of chapters in the NAACP, the blackest chapters of California's NAACP, broke away from them, Julian came after her in a way that was just so savage. It's just, he tried to ruin her and it didn't work. So anyways,
that's why I wrote that. That's why I wrote that article back in the day. NAACP was started by white folks, and they still don't care about black people. It's for things like that. But wait a minute, I just want to make sure I got this right. The head of the California NAACP is anti-renter control, anti-lower price medication, and anti-charter. It seems to be like a theme of anti-blackness or anti-black communities in that thread. Am I missing a pattern here?
You're not missing a pattern. Her name is Alice Huffman. People should look her up. It's in the news. It's an open secret in California. So when you're on Twitter and you're arguing with a white woman who says to you, well, I don't have to listen to you about the charter schools or charter moratorium because I stand with the NAACP, which becomes like the black good housekeeping seal. Meaning I can't possibly be racist or,
I'm down with this.
Or against black parents because I'm down with the NAACP. What they're really saying is I'm down with a retail civil rights organization that was purchased by the American Federation of Teachers to have this position so that I can say this to you and discount what you and all these black families who want these schools have to say, right? It is a colonial play. And if you look at who passed that, and listen, folks, don't listen to me. Don't make this about whether or not Chris is saying something true or not. Do your research. Just go look up. Yeah. Just go look up Alice Huffman.
You could do Vasquez type research. Just go listen to what they said. Go listen.
Let me do some Vasquez type research. Let me pull up my own research. And actually, there's a link in the Friends and Family column here. So about the charter schools versus the privatization of colored people. It's a piece that I wrote a while ago that details some of this. So even as Bernie is saying, my education plan stands with the NAACP on the moratorium, the leader who passed that moratorium was actively fighting the things that Bernie came to California to push, like a cap on the price of prescription drugs, like rent control for poor people, right? She was actively, the NAACP of California was actively fighting those propositions. And on this last cycle, this last election that we just had, go back and see what she was paid to push. Just Google her name, Alice Huffman. This is the person who gave you the charter moratorium. And go back and look at the things that she fought against. She was paid, in one case, like $850,000, for a month or 2 months work, right? And then come back and talk to me about how you stand with the NAACP on their position on charters. Folks, we can't be dummies. We always have to look behind the stories. We always have to see behind the stories of what's being done. And we can't expect that the Megyn Kellys of the world, the Diane Ravages of the world, the Carol Burrises of the world, the Randy Weingardens of the world, any of them are anything other than people who have a long history of being crafty about ways of trapping us and telling us it's for our own good.
Yeah, and particularly, I think that message, not for the folks who want to claim allyship and hold up the NAACP signs as your ticket, your pass, your badge. They don't often speak for the black grandparents, the black parents, the children themselves when it comes to quality education. Some chapters do. And that's what you need to look at. Every chapter doesn't agree. So when you just say, oh, I stand with the NAACP, for them to say, like, which one? which chapter, which president, because they're not all created equal. Forget what you say. All, educators or all liberators, they're not created equal. Some are not actually liberators. Some always side with the oppressor, right? And so, and if I told you that, one of the imperial mothers, Carol Burris from Nope, at one time she told me, she sent me an email and said, "You're an evil, nasty man." I laughed. I thought it was funny. But now I'm like, you know what? You sound like 45. 45 talks like that. You're supposed to be an educator. I was like, and I'm an evil, nasty man. And all I did was share how much I love Black children. My love for my Black children, the students I served as shoemaker for 11 years, the students I served in other parts of West Philadelphia for the previous 16 years. That's all I was sharing with her. Like, this is what I believe. This is what I've done. This is what I've seen students accomplish. This is what parents are saying. "Oh, you're an evil, nasty man." Because at one point she's like, "Oh, I won't come to your school because I don't even believe that it's a neighborhood charter school." Blah, blah. I was like, just let us know when you're at the door. There's a bell. We'll let you in. You can come walk around. You can come talk to families, whatever. So that was originally what she was going to do. And then at some point when I disagreed with her, when I had the audacity and uppity nature to disagree with her or something, all of a sudden I became this evil, nasty man. And she's like, I would never visit your school. I'm like, one, so what?
Right.
Two, it ain't my school. This is Parkside School. This is Carroll Park School. This is West Philly School. You know what I mean? So like, it's not an affront to me. Like I didn't give a damn. Like we got Amir Suleiman coming to visit and we're going to worry about a Carol Burris. Like that means, again, imperial thinking.
I was about to say
imperial thinking to even part your lips to say, and in your warped mind to think that we give a damn whether you come to our school or not. You invited yourself, actually, like, well, I want to see this. And we said, okay, sure. Right. But, that's the, and then the two pieces that you show where it was Thurman and Julian. If I recall, President-elect said he wanted an educator, someone who actually taught and taught for some time or led for some time. Right. Like, so when they attack Dr. Santelices, who's a superintendent, who has taught, who has led, who has coached, who has done research, who has worked on policy, you've attacked this Black woman, and who you're trying out are like, oh, like I don't see how they even compare to Dr. Santelices, the two that she just nominated.
Yes.
And okay, like they're brothers. All right, I respect what you're doing. I don't see how they compare to Dr. Santelices' body of work. That's, to me, that's crazy.
Well, I mean, it's important because I'm glad you brought that up, because they only have one criteria. Like, their one criteria is that you agree with us, that you will stomp out any choice, any charters, any TFA, anything that we don't like, anything that threatens our white women teachers' stronghold. Right. You have to remember that white women leaders of teachers unions have a criminally insane obsession with maintaining their power and not letting any of the kids get off the farm and go in any direction. So if I agree with you on that, I have passed the biggest of all of their criteria. So Tony Thurman, having never taught in a public school, having no receipts for actually being responsible for children, none of that, still makes a very good candidate, because he will say exactly what they want him to say. He will do exactly what they want him to do. And free thinking Black people, educated, free thinking, qualified Black people, they have to actually stamp them out before they even get to the table of being considered for the role. Yeah. They have to get you out of the role. So you look at somebody like Dr. Santelices, PhD from Harvard, master's degree from Columbia. I believe her undergrad was Brown. I think she has more than one master's, right? Leads in an actual very tough school system, and leads with a very fair and kind of open way of seeing the world. She's not reform. She's not, a charter school supporter or any of that type of stuff. She's just an educator. She's just doing the actual job.
So like I'm trying to do right by Black kids. Like
I'm trying to do right by all kids, as a matter of fact, too.
Yeah, exactly.
And they want her out of the process, but they want Tony Thurman in the process. which is what they do. It's not about qualifications. It is just really about whether or not you're going to further their agenda of white supremacy, white female supremacy, and occupational ownership. They want to own the occupation of teaching all kids who now in public schools happen to be more of color than they are white in public schools now. And they want to maintain ownership. They are no different than the right-wing deplorables that they would argue are the worst people ever, right? I'll wrap. Here's my final thoughts. I would love to get your final thoughts, but my final wrap on this is just this. Megyn Kelly, Carol Burris, Diane Ravitch, all of them have unearned power to be heard, to control, to influence, to move policy, to have their stories told. And that comes at the expense of millions of other people who do not have a right to be heard, to tell their story, and to tell their story how they see fit or whatnot. That's not a new situation. That's an old situation. That is a situation we need to break down. So when it comes down to educated Black people being able to speak for themselves and make it into leadership roles or whatnot, I get defensive about that. I get defensive about things like Dr. Santelias, because what I see is the Black woman and the white woman coming into contest right now in these two examples that we gave. In the Megyn, we had a Black woman author who's writing a story from her perspective that has deep pain and trauma, and it's an articulation of something that has existed in her and in others and the rest of us for long periods of time that doesn't get heard and seen. And I am proud of Education Post for actually posting that article and making people think and making them see the story that maybe wouldn't get put into the New York Post. Maybe you wouldn't see it in your little publications that cater just to you. So I am proud of Education Post for publishing that. I'm also proud for the New York Post to take ours and take it totally to the other direction and prove everything that we're talking about. Center it around this one white woman.
Proud. You appreciate him for doing that.
I'm proud of it. I'm proud of it. If it makes you show your true colors again and again and again by taking our piece and centering it around one white woman who has a history of racism and making it about her, you have just proven my point. So thank you very much for doing that, New York Post. You suck otherwise, but thank you very much for doing that one thing. And when it comes to Diane Ravitch and Carol Burris, two non-educating people, two people who don't educate kids of color, two people who are working actively to cut people at the knees and chop off careers and chop off resumes off of qualified people like Dr. Santelias and others, expect us to come for you. I just expect us that you can call my funders and tell them that I should be fired. You can call back channels and talk to people about me and try and get me cut off from power. You can do whatever you need to do. We will come for you if you continue this 400-year exploration of the imperial mother white supremacist behavior of trying to cut out qualified Black people from being able to lead themselves and from them to be able to have their own say. And I don't care how many tokenized get out-ish Negroes you throw up into our face to try and supplant or supplement the ones that we put up to lead us. You will never have the right to actually choose our leaders for us. You're not qualified, and you're probably ill-willed when it comes to doing a good job of it. So just stop. That's my message. What about you, Sharif? What do you say at the end here?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I just want to shout out Nalia Weber, for writing that. I hope everyone in the audience goes and reads it and shares it, multiple times, on multiple platforms. Kudos to you and your team for publishing it, but also supporting, various writers. One of my first blogs was on Ed Post, and from there I was encouraged to continue writing, continue to share my experiences. I want to encourage Black educators, Black families, Black grandparents, caregivers, we have to share our experiences more and more and more, because if not, Zora Neale Hurston, I think said, like, if you're silent about your pain, they'll kill you and say you enjoyed it. And so I think writing and speaking, all of this, Dr. King said, you want to be an activist, pick up a pen. Right. And so I think that, what she shows, what Sister Nalia showed was like, hey, there's meaning behind this. this is the racial stress that I experience, I am going to talk about it. I am not going to suffer from it. And you all say that it didn't happen, or we just were happy-go-lucky Negroes on your plantation. To the imperial mothers, stop coming after our people. Like, you are so far removed from the Black community, from the brown communities. You are so far removed from the pain and anguish that people suffer through educational injustice for generations. You have secured your position. You have secured your grandchildren's positions. Yet, from those lofty, privileged spaces, you want to attack and wage war on the people who are trying to serve our communities with one hand shackled to the opposite foot based off the racist systems that you've benefited from. Stop it. And the brothers that we brought up, in this, Carol championed y'all. And we, unlike them, we're not attacking you as a person. We're not attacking you as a educator of college or a state superintendent. But what we are saying, if you didn't check, and well, Vasquez, I know you didn't because you actually retweeted her. So Dr. Thurman, we hope if you did not, if this was brought to your attention and you did not check them, shame on you. If you did, great. That's exactly what should have happened when people throw your name on the bus as they're running over sisters like Dr. Santalisa's.
Whew. Well, that's a word. I just want to double down on, Dr. Julian Vasquez. You are welcome. And Tony Thurman, any of you are welcome to come on this show at any time. We will have an open conversation. We are civilized Black people. We don't cut people's arms off and hands off and whatnot. We are civilized Black men. So we can have a conversation if you want to. Dr. Vasquez, you have actually attacked us and others on their behalf on a pretty consistent basis over the years. You basically wrote off the work that me, Sharif, and others do as just getting paid, as Black people just getting paid to do the bidding of wealthy white people. You actually went after Brittany Packnett Cunningham in the past life, where she actually just said to you, why would you join this right-wing attack on me? And your basically thing to her was, we're not brothers and sisters. We're, you're part of TFA, and I don't like TFA. So that shows where your allegiance is. But hey, we're open. Any of y'all want to come home? You want to come back to the farm? You're welcome anytime to come back to the farm. We will have to frisk you before you come back, because we don't really trust you 110% because you've been doing weird and vile things with your peoples there. So
yeah, I don't even know if it's coming back to the farm. It's more or less like come to the mountains with the Maroons. Like that's
true. Well, we don't want to go that far, bro. We don't want.
They just come to visit. They ain't staying. They ain't staying. I don't even know if they'll actually come in. They might just come to the border, like, hey, can we talk? But listen, we're going to stand up for our people, and particularly those who are serving our people. And I appreciate feedback and criticism, but the best criticism for me are from the very people that I'm serving. Those folks from those towers, I save it.
Well, I will say this also. If you are white and you've been listening to this and you are offended by this, I am open to hearing about it. I am a person of dialogue. My mind is a constant river of dialogue and conversation with different people. I'm open to it. And I'm open to hearing from you about it. So let me know if you think we've gotten anything wrong here or we're missing your point on your behalf. But I do want to say that no matter what, I am a person who believes that the last will be first, that we should always be fighting for the least of these, that we should never punch down. And when oppressed or marginalized people say to you that they are being oppressed or marginalized, you should listen. You should listen. You should use your ears, not your mouth, especially twice as often, especially if you're in a privileged position and you know it. If you don't do that, then I think there's some suspicion to be had for what your true motives are. I'll end there. This has been another Freedom Friday. You are still not free, but hopefully you are more free than you were at the beginning of today's conversation. You're still not free, but we're going to keep doing Freedom Fridays. The mission of Freedom Friday is to put ourselves out of business, which means is the day that we are free, this show will end and we will stop doing these. So thank